Muy buenas noches, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is For the Record, brand new show with political and economical views from the people that are directing it straight to you. Tonight is a special night. We have the candidate for the Liberal Party for the provincial election of York Southwestern, Miss Nadia Guerrera. I just want to remind everybody that you can go to Singo TV on its channels 249, 250 to watch this show. It's across the H.E.R network and the Spanglish World Network. As well, remember to go to the stores of iOS and Android to download the application of Single TV, and you can watch it on your phone, on every apparatus that you might want to watch it in. Remember as well that Cinco TV can be captured across Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, and on all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Good evening, Ms. Guerrera. Thank you for being on our show tonight. Muy buenas noches, señorita Guerrera. Bienvenida a su hogar aquí en For the Record.
Gracias Eduardo por invitarme a estar aquí con todos y con usted esta noche. Es un placer para mí.
Bueno, vamos a empezar un poco a hablar sobre su historia, su carrera como profesora, su carrera como activista comunitaria. We are going to start talking about your career, about your civic career, and also your involvement in the community in York Southwestern and across Ontario, because you have been very active, as we know, across during your career as a teacher in the front lines of our educational system. But I want to start by asking you to please give us a little bit of a bio on who you are and where you come from.
Ok, hola, yo soy Nadia Guerrera, voy a empezar en español, pero disculpe que yo hablo solo un poquito de español, soy italiana, mis padres vinieron de Italia, emigraron cuando eran niños con mis abuelos y yo soy la primera en la familia de mi mamá que nació en este país, en Canadá. Pero tengo primos que viven en Buenos Aires, en Argentina, y estudié un rato en Centroamérica, en Guatemala. Trabajé en proyectos de desarrollo y por eso hablo un poquito de español. Es un placer estar aquí con usted en este programa. Entonces, yo soy una profesora de colegio aquí en York Southwestern. Son 20 años que trabajo como profesora. And so it's actually from this position as a frontline educator that I feel the call to run for office. And for me, that's what it is. I have a great job. I love my job. I love my students. And I am doing this. I'm running for office so that we can bring perspectives and experience from the front line in education, and by the way, from every other sector. I'm one frontline person that's running for the Ontario Liberals under the leadership of Stephen Del Duca in this election. But it's so important that we have people who have been on the front lines, frontline workers, educators, healthcare professionals, small business owners, and so on, at the policy table, because it's such an important time right now. We've got, we've come through 2 years of a pandemic, and we're 22 years into a new millennium, not even just a new century. So it's time to bring that kind of experience to bear in the way we decide what our future is going to look like and how our province is going to prevail as a leader, not just in Canada, but in the world. So to answer your question about the front line is what's driving me to run. And I have been a leader in my field. I'm the head of the social science department at Chaminade College, which, as I said, en un colegio aquí in New York Southwest. And uh, I've been teaching for 20 years. During that time, a good teacher doesn't just teach what they know, they teach who they are, they live by example, and they meet their students where they're at. So during those 20 years of my career, I've had the opportunity to learn along with my students about ways that we can impact our world and make a difference in our larger community. And so that happened with me when students were very concerned about Ukraine and what was going on in Ukraine back in 2014. And I used the Euromaidan uh, movement that, of course, involved students in Ukraine coming together to basically push their government to be accountable. They had a government who ran on the idea of strengthening ties with the European Union, and then once they were elected, turned and rather than doing that, uh, looked towards Russia and strengthening those ties. So people took to the streets peacefully. They protested, and I thought this was a great opportunity to show students that look at that these were the change makers. They were people their own age in other parts of the world using peaceful systems of democracy to bring about change. And so I said, let's learn about this. Why can't we also make change? And I wanted to teach them about the importance of civic engagement and democracy. And I thought, what better way than to use the arts, because everybody can feel when we have the arts, and they can express in ways that maybe they can't as easily just in words. So we created me and a friend of mine who's an author and journalist in New York, Andrea Halupa, created an entire initiative called Orwell Art. And in that, we basically used this opportunity to teach students about what was going on around the world and how to use their voices peacefully to bring about change. And it culminated in the curation of and the creation of art monuments, public art monuments to this effect. And of course, those were then shown in galleries. We invited people out. It was so successful. After our first time, media was there, Ukrainian, Canadian media. And after that, we ended up saying, hey, let's do this on a larger scale. And we did. And we connected with schools across Toronto. And then the next year, with schools in Toronto connecting with schools in Ukraine. And this just developed and developed and led to the Canada Ukraine Foundation and the Holodomor Mobile Classroom, which, of course, the Holodomor is the Ukrainian genocide that happened in 1932-33 under Joseph Stalin, where millions of Ukrainians were starved to death. We ended up, Ontario Liberal government actually brought that into the curriculum in 2015. And at that point, the Holodomor Mobile Classroom and Education Consortium and the Canada Ukraine Foundation turned to me and said, we loved Orwell Art so much. We want you to design a module for our mobile classroom that's going to go across Canada and teach students about the Holodomor. So I wrote that, of course, using Orwell Art. It was all about the call to civic engagement. And we focused on civic engagement and the use of misinformation throughout not only the 1930s, but all the years after, to cover up the genocide that happened, and how important it is for us, citizens in a democracy, to be able to know what the truth is, siphon through misinformation, and of course, speak truth to power for the sake of justice. So, as a department head, I lead people, I lead curriculum, I've written curriculum that's taught across this country. And it's one of the most humbling pieces of my career, because I got to actually speak and help people speak who had been silenced for so long. So you can see my activist nature, but always using systems and peaceful processes to be able to bring about important change.
Definitely. But we know that this is not your first time running. You have been
Yes,
very active. If I'm correct, 4 years ago you ran in High Park, and although you didn't succeed, that didn't diminish your interest in being in office. Give us a little bit of the what you learned from your first experience running in High Park.
I will. Thank you for asking that. So, yes, I ran in the 2018 election under the leadership of Kathleen Wynne for the Ontario Liberals. And as you might recall, most seats in the west of Toronto and in Toronto proper were actually held by Liberals at that time because we had a more majority government. But at the time, I decided it was important to run then, and it's still the same reason today, but even more so under the current conservative government of Doug Ford, that we desperately need to have people from the front line at the policy table. You know, Ontario Liberals had been in office for 15 years at the time, and I still felt that we needed to have more frontline people, although they had done amazing work and brought graduation rates up from 67% under the Harris government to like 90% through the tenure of the 15 years of Liberal government. We still needed to tackle different problems, like what are we doing with trades in K to 12 education, and how are we helping students build resiliency, whether it's around mental health or special education needs, or just developing pathways forward. I felt that was so important. So I ran then. I couldn't run in York Southwestern. We had the legendary Laura Albanese, who held this seat for 11 and a half years, running in this area. She's a mentor. She's a friend. So I ran in a riding where I had taught in 3 schools. I had roots there as well. And I ran in Parkdale Hyde Park. It was an incredible experience. We ran a fantastic campaign. I got to know many people who are still good friends and supporters today. And I'm grateful for that. In that, the outcome, of course, was not what we wanted. The Ontario Liberals ended up with 7 seats in the legislature, lost party status. And I felt that then more than ever, we needed leaders to step up, and that leaders exist on all levels, not just for who leads the party, right? Stephen ran for the leadership, and another 4 or 5 people within our party ran for that. But my role, I felt, was to show up as a Liberal, was to show up in places where people needed to see Ontario Liberals. And that's what I did. I never stopped. So the election ended, I licked my wounds because that was obviously I put my heart into it. But then I just kept showing up, where there was only 7 sitting Liberals to show up at any event. I would go across the province. If I was called in Kingston to say, Nadia, we want you to sit on our panel. We want an Ontario Liberal on our Women's Day panel. I would drive. This is not during an election time. This is 2018, 2019. I would drive to Kingston and I would go and show up at the panel. Or, there's a Thai Pongal event in Mississauga. I would drive through a snowstorm in my little Fiat 500 and I would go there and I'd bring a scroll and I'd speak. Andrew H.E.R was there and other elected officials would be there, Liberals and Conservatives and NDPers. And I'd show up unelected with a scroll from our interim leader, John Fraser. And I would just be there because I felt it was so important for people to see that, to know there were millions of people across Ontario that actually voted Liberal. Didn't turn into more than 7 seats, but I felt there was a need for us to show up. So I kept showing up and I never stopped. And then I participated, in the leadership, supporting my pick in the race, who happened to be Stephen, and happy to see him there now as our leader. But I just kept going. And then Laura decided not to run. I was working and living in this area. And I said, why wouldn't I run here? So I decided to run here. And I'm so happy that I am, because when I knock on doors today, I hear, hi, Miss Guerrera, I was your student. And they tell me their name and I know who they are. Of course, I don't always know their faces because we've been in a pandemic. So I've been teaching them on a screen and sometimes I wouldn't get to see them. So it's really a kind of an interesting experience this time around, to be running where I teach. And also given the other dimension of the pandemic that's brought to bear on all of that.
So
So what have I learned? Oh my gosh, I don't know if I answered your question.
I think you have, but there is another aspect. You mentioned the pandemic. The pandemic was very difficult for a lot of Ontarians, and you didn't stop just at teaching at doing your job during the pandemic, but you went beyond that. You, as I am, I was, I've been reading about what you have done. You helped get people vaccinated. That's something that wasn't your responsibility, but but you wanted your
Yeah.
section to be vaccinated. York Southwestern.
Sí, 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 es verdad, Eduardo. Gracias para esta pregunta. Sí, last May, I want to say, it was around April, maybe April, end of April, beginning of May. And of course, I was wanting to knock on doors because I had already been nominated and I was dying to speak to voters in York Southwestern. But of course, we were going out and we were giving out, pamphlets in the mailbox because we couldn't knock. It wasn't safe at the time. And then the next wave hit, and we were in the lockdown, that third wave, you might recall. And we had stay-at-home orders. So even if I wanted to go put things in people's mailboxes, I couldn't even do that. But I got a call, and it was from Women's College Hospital. I don't know how they got a hold of me. Somebody must have known somebody. And they said, "Look, you're the Liberal candidate in York Southwest. In York Southwestern, 3 out of 4 of the postal codes in York Southwestern are hotspots. They are COVID hotspots. And we need help to do outreach in those communities. Can you help us?" And this is at the time, before there were any mandates or before vaccines were even available to anybody, right? This is, you think, last spring, people were just starting to get vaccinated in April, who were, teachers. So by the end of April, there was this conversation about being able to spread that out and help people have access. There was also a lot of fear and hesitancy. So there was this big public health push to let people know where they might access a vaccine. And I said, sure, let's help. So my team and I, we printed like 25 to 30,000 pieces of literature. We did it in multiple languages because, as you know, York Southwestern is a very diverse riding. And I think we did about 10,000 of those pieces in, it was a 3 language piece. We had English, Espanol, and Portuguese in the piece. And what it said was, this is who I am, because people need to know where their information is coming from. That's desperately important in an age of misinformation. So it's me, it's Nadia Guerrera. I'm letting you know that, that there are vaccine clinics happening in the area. And then we would put a little sticker on it because it would change literally daily where those pop-up clinics would be. And we would tell people, we would literally sit there, all of us, separately, right? Because it was a stay-at-home order, and we would sticker these pieces of literature and then go and drop them off in everybody's mailbox. We did that on foot, by hand, with love, because we wanted people to access it. And what we found was there were so many people where there were barriers to that information. So maybe English wasn't their first language. Maybe they didn't have a health card, um, or they were just afraid. They'd come from a background or a culture where there was mistrust around medical systems. So we just tried to help to bridge that gap. And we did a clinic. Actually, we were the first ones to do a clinic in a Toronto restaurant while the closure was on, and we did it at Churrasquera Martin's Grill House on Rogers Road, and we targeted the businesses in the area, the Portuguese businesses who wanted to help get access for their employees to get a vaccine if they so choose. And so that's what we did. We did 2 of those clinics, one for a first dose, one for a second dose, and we actually helped about 700 to 800 people access their vaccinations at a time when they wanted them and they couldn't find them anywhere. And that was truly, for me, an act of public service, and that's the spirit that I've done my career as a teacher. And that's really the heart and the spirit with which I'm hoping to serve this community of York Southwestern, should they choose me on June 2nd.
So let's talk a little bit about, because there is a liberal platform, there is different things that the leader, and along with his board of candidates, have
Yep.
decided that's the correct approach to what's happening, and how to change the economy, how to change the way Ontarians live. But York Southwest is a unique community where you have it's a highly denominated working class, from people from all kinds of unions, from the bricklayers to carpenters to. So how are you getting together with them and trying to show them what this platform is bringing to them?
Honestly, I'm going to their doors. I go to their doors. I meet them at the grocery store. I meet them at the bus stop, and I knock on their door. I mean, they might see me in, at the bakeries, or places where we go around in the cafes in the community. But mostly, I'm going to meet people where they are at, because that's what they need. People's lives are busy. People are worried about keeping a roof over their head in a way that they haven't been in a long time. People are worried about the cost of living. People are concerned about the future for their children and whether, in fact, they'll even be able to live in Ontario, never mind Toronto. This is what I hear when I talk to people. And by the way, that diversity you're talking about, it's everywhere in this riding. Okay. It includes all of those people you were talking about. So many different tradespeople, frontline workers, PSWs, the list goes on and on. And so I take the show on the road, Eduardo. I really do, because that's how I can reach people. And when I catch them at their door or at the grocery store or at the bus stop, you'd be surprised what they tell me. Nadia, I have to decide between my rent and buying groceries. I'm worried about how this education system and how my kids will do coming out of it. You know, I'm concerned about the cost of living. I can't put gas in my car. I can't afford this transit stop. And so, it's incredible because I feel that the Ontario Liberal policies that have been come out. Now our platform is still yet to be released in its entirety, but we've been letting out pieces by pieces by pieces over time. And what I fundamentally say is this: with the Ontario Liberals, you have a party and you would have a government that fundamentally believes it's the government's role to be involved in these things. It's the government's job to provide quality public services. La educación pública, sistema de salud pública, that's our business. We should be providing those things. We should be helping to make your life more affordable, right? Not by user fees, but by actually assisting. We collect taxes. You should see those back in services that help you get ahead. Eduardo, I would not be here. I would not be sitting in this chair with my name on a sign or a teacher in an amazing high school in this community if I didn't have quality public education and a government that believed I was worth investing in. Necesitamos un gobierno que quiere investir en nosotros. Say no, we can't get ahead. My father, he worked for a small business. My mother, she was a public servant. Neither of them had university degrees. They worked. They worked 2 and 3 jobs. But I was able to go to Queen's University because I got OSAP, Ontario Student Loans. Mr. Ford came in, he cut those, right? I had quality education with a decent sized number of in my class. Why? Because we had governments that decided it was worth investing in public education. And when my grandparents got sick after working for their entire lives and building this country, like so many of our grandparents did, and our parents are still doing, they got to have access to quality healthcare. To me, I'm a liberal because that's my business. And Ontario Liberals have put together policies and plans that reflect that reality. Now, I don't feel that the current Conservative government, despite the fact that they're giving away, little handouts here and there right before the election, that's great, but it's too little too late. It does not show that they actually, where they could have invested, they cut. I'm talking about education. I'm talking about healthcare. It's fine to say you gave somebody a raise, but really you capped every public sector worker at 1% raise. You had your nurses on burnout, your PSWs on burnout, your hospitals going into code orange because you couldn't keep staff. But yet you capped them at 1% with no discussion. That's an example of a government that doesn't believe in investing in its people. And I have a problem with that. That's why I'm here, right? So, what are some Ontario Liberal plans? Cancel the wasteful 413 highway that saves people 30 seconds and cuts right through our green belt. Take that money, invest it in education infrastructure. That's $10 billion. Fix our school buildings across Ontario. Take money for education and make sure that we have enough supports for special education, that we have supports for mental health. This is particularly important when we start to think about students with autism, students with, physical and developmental disabilities. They're not getting that one-on-one support and they deserve that. Not to mention our students who are going to be going into universities, colleges, the trades. They need more one-on-one um, help when it comes to even helping them decide where they're going to go. So we need to invest in those things. And like I said, education is my wheelhouse. So this is something I know a lot about. But you look at transit. Why are people paying $3.25 a fare? We're saying no. We're going to drop that, make it $1 a fare for the next 2 years. Hopefully by then inflation is, back to some semblance of normal. Um, and help people, not just people who own cars, but everybody who needs to get around, because when those people move, our economy moves, right? When they go to work, our economy works. What about our small businesses? Help them get access to loans. Get rid of the corporate taxes for businesses that have been hit the hardest during the pandemic. Some of those service-based industries. If you're a local startup, you're a young person with a great idea, or an older person with a great idea, you know what? Don't pay that incorporation fee, because we need your innovation. If we want to be leaders, we need your thinking. We need the best of the people we've invested in to come forward. So these are just some things that I can mention. There's so many more. Helping keep people's bills down. Stephen Del Duca came to York South Weston last week and was here with me announcing on the prepared foods. So you go to the store, you buy something for $20 or less, and you're going to eat it immediately or drink it. Guess what? We're taking off 8% of the HST to make that more affordable for people, for families, and we're going to do it while investing in our systems, because we deserve a future where we can see ourselves in, no matter where we're at in our age or stage of life. So,
So I have a question from one of our viewers
okay.
directly, and the question is, how is the Liberal government going to do with hospitals and the times that people have to wait to get attention?
Uh, so
It's a
that's a
difficult subject, and I know it's a difficult subject, but it's something that it's happening more and more every time.
well, it's a great question, and thank you to the listener or viewer for asking it. Healthcare is top of mind for so many of us, especially during this pandemic. I'll say during because it's still going on. Um, so the first thing is, you will hear the Ford government talk a lot about beds. We're investing in beds, 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 and that's great. But for every bed, and my sister, who's a nurse and a manager at one of Toronto's Toronto's major hospitals, will remind me that with every bed, you need at least four staff, four nurses, right? You need doctors, you need nurses, you need personal support workers. So people are not wanting to be drawn into these professions or stay in these professions right now, because it's a grind. It is a grind. They go into it with the best of intentions. They're not earning enough money for the amount of risk they're taking. We've seen that during the pandemic. They're capped because of Regulation 124 at 1%. That's not enough to deal with the cost of living increases that are going on. So we would repeal that right away. We would repeal that right away. We would be trying to draw people into those professions, help them out while they're there, trying to gain talent, retain talent, and things like that. About hospital wait times, that has a lot to do with staff, not just with beds. So I think you would see it there. If I just kind of look at it, sorry, the other thing about healthcare is a lot of people who are seniors are going to hospitals. So and then getting transferred maybe to long term care. So we're thinking about transitioning the long term care situation that's there right now, which is for profit care, and actually um, trying to help people age at home so they don't have to go into long-term care. But if they did, to not have for-profit, not-for-profit care, to be able to do that and do it better. You're going to hear a lot more on the health policies that haven't been released yet. Like I said, my wheelhouse is education. However,
So,
you're going to be
so
hearing
let's
more on healthcare there. Yeah,
so let's touch that because we know that Canada is a great country and it has accepted a lot of different people from different countries.
yeah,
Your subject is education. We have foreign trained professionals that could be working in the healthcare and other
right.
areas of the economy in Canada, but instead they are driving Ubers for a living because of all those restrictions that are put on them.
That's
Um,
100% true. That's 100% true.
so how can we help? How can we aid that situation? And I am not saying that it's a liberal platform, but if if you could explain to people how to get how how to get uh, better acquainted with the system, how would you explain it from as a po- possible elected official in your area?
Well, so I mean, a lot of that's federal, right? I mean, you would come in, you need to have certain skills, and to get into the country and so on. That's at a federal level. Of course,
Oh, so
Ontario
let's talk
has
about the
its.
people that are already here. There's a
So
lot of them.
I'm not really understanding your question. So are you asking me?
So
Um,
as a you are going to go into government,
yeah.
and there is a lot of foreign trained of trained professionals that are already in Canada
Hmm.
that are not working in the area because of protectionism in a certain way by the different associations that govern over certifications. And I know that during the previous liberal tenure,
Hmm.
they were trying to get away from all that scrutiny that was done to to help these people get into work in their own
Yeah.
professions, and to mold expand the access to different
Well,
areas.
let's put it this way: if you have people with skills and you need those jobs filled because you need that work done, then to me, it makes sense to be able to um, eliminate some of those barriers while at the same time uh, attracting, training, and mentoring young people that are within this country. And there's roles to play for people who are coming to Canada, or maybe whatever stage of their immigration, or foreign workers, or there's different categories to be able to come in and do those jobs because we need them to be done, right? We need homes to be built. We need nurses on the front lines. We need personal support workers. We need it in every field. So I would agree, Eduardo, that those barriers have to be sort of surmounted. I would also say that at the same time as you're doing that, you need to have good pathways being created in your K to 12 education system, in adult learning, along with our trades unions who are actually doing a lot of the training and certification, to be able to be doing that on all sides of the spectrum, to those who are coming from abroad and coming to Canada, but also for those that are here. Because if you have that capacity, you have those capabilities, right, with people at all different levels, then you should be using them not only to work and do the job, but to train and apprentice and mentor and grow the skill set that's already there, right? You would be leveraging those capabilities to be able to even have a better system than that's there right now. So to me, I would say yes, and how you would do that. You know what? You have to partner. You have to consult with people at all those levels, people in who are doing the certifications, right? Whether it's in a college or university, a trade, or a K to 12, you'd have to build those bridges, pardon the pun, and be able to be able to see where there are barriers, how they can be tweaked, because sometimes, you're sitting at the top. That's my very point as running as a teacher. Just because, somebody's sitting at the policy table in education doesn't mean they know exactly how to tweak those barriers uh, on the ground. So it's having that sensibility to be able to know what questions to ask, who to sit down with, to leave room for that consultation, and to allow that consultation to drive where you go. And I'll give you an example. All the policy pieces that the Ontario Liberals are coming out with, that we, I should say, are coming out with now, that was all derived by consultation with people. We had 60,000 people weigh in on our Take the Mic process. And that was a whole series of questions about different policy areas, in different policy areas, asking people to weigh in. And it wasn't just a, yes, no, click off a box type of thing. It was real engagement, questions, answers, commentary, all in there. Plus, we broke down into policy squads. I was on the K to 12 education policy squad, where we literally for months met with stakeholders in education. People did it in healthcare, people did it on the economy, people did it in, all sorts of different areas across the policy spectrum, sat down, listened, and from those conversations, took it back. And that's what our platform is based on. That is all the policy pieces you have seen and will see is backed by that kind of consultation. So I think that it's not a quick answer, because it shouldn't be. If I sat here and told you I know how to do all of that myself, that would be, it wouldn't be the right answer um, in terms of solving the problem. So my answer is consult, partner, work with, and leverage what capabilities are already there.
That, that's really that's really great, because that's one of the things that we have seen during these 4 years that hasn't been done properly. The consult, although we had a health table of experts that were kind of consulted on how, when was it the right time to open, we can see that it wasn't well used uh, to an extent.
Sadly, sadly, honestly, sadly, because if you think about it, you're elected to represent people as a local MPP. You're elected as a government to reflect and to represent the entire province. And so to me, I just don't see how you can do that effectively without tapping into the experts in those fields. Because otherwise, you miss so much of the nuance. You miss so much of the richness in there. And you're not using the institutional knowledge, you're not using the expertise to be able to create the best outcomes, right? I'm not interested in being part of something that's just going to continue the same old, same old. Like like I said, we're 22 years into a new millennium. We have to be leaders. We cannot be, you know, creating the mediocre replica of another man's genius, for lack of a better word. If we want to be a G7 country in Canada going into the future, and we want to maintain our position in Ontario as one of the largest subnational economies in the world, that means we have to leverage all the experience, expertise, know-how, skills, creativity, and innovation that's there, and put our best foot forward in every sector. That's what I'm interested in doing. That's why I'm here. And I think that's what you're going to see in the Ontario Liberal Plan. And I agree that I don't feel that over these 4 years we've seen it.
So we have we've and I'm going to focus on your expertise, which is education, and let's talk about what happened in the educational system during the pandemic, because all,
Well,
although it didn't serve correctly the students,
no.
because teachers were forced to teach in a different parameter that they weren't accustomed to. Uh, Also, they utilize the current government utilized it to do the closure of schools, to because they said we don't, now
Yeah.
the school is not well equipped. Therefore, instead of improving the school or their systems, Let's close it down. Let's shut it down.
Eduardo, I have to tell you that, and now I'm speaking with my teacher hat on, of course, and my people leader and my curriculum leader hat on. I am very saddened by what we saw in education. So there's a few things. So first of all, the impact on students has been devastating, I think, from what I've seen. Now, there's gaps in learning. Well, we could expect that, right? We could expect that the academic achievement is going to be lower because of that. And it is. It is. But the other thing that I've seen, and I was working up until the 11th of April was my day that I went on a leave of absence to run for office. So I've been there. And the social gaps, the mental health strains, the anxiety that I've seen among students is more than I've ever seen in my career. And that's 20 years long. So I know it's been a big strain on students. And there's a lot that we have to learn there now. We have to teach them again how to be a student. What does a regular day look like? What does it mean to work with somebody else? I had students say to me for the first time in my career, Eduardo, can I work alone? When you'd give them group work, they'd be so anxious about working in a group that they'd want to work alone, and I'd have to say, look, okay, let's we're going to talk about it. We have to work together here. This is important. But what does it look like? And that, really like very basic stuff. So it was very hard on students. It was hard on families. And in many cases, a lot of the mothers who were at home, working from home, were doing the lion's share of the load. They were doing their job and they were taking care of their kids. Many dads as well. So it was a huge strain on the family. That was a big, not only mental health strain, economic strain, etc. Because maybe they had to take days off work. They couldn't actually go in, and so on and so forth. Um, but on teachers, and that's one area where I'm so proud of my colleagues. So proud. If you think about it, we went from in-person learning to putting everything online and doing that for students in like record-breaking time. And people weren't comfortable. They didn't necessarily know. They weren't using these formats before, and suddenly they were on board. This was a massive shift. That happens because of goodwill, Eduardo. That happens because of goodwill that you can't measure. And it wasn't ideal, but teachers showed up because they cared. Administrators were worked ragged. They became suddenly public health, as well as administrators of schools and leaders of people, and that was very stressful on them. So I'll tell you, I was exhausted by November. I felt like the way I would feel in June. I felt like that this November, with the quad system, and then not the quad system, and then it was just a lot to adjust to. So, and then you had hybrid learning. Oh my gosh, I could talk about that all day. um, Teaching in real life while you're on camera, teaching people at home who you're also engaging at the same time. So you tell me, how are you paying attention equally to the people in front of you as you could to the people at home, or to the people at home as you would be to the people in front of you? It was impossible. It was like a catch 22. If you were looking at the screen, you weren't paying attention to the person in front of you. It was just horrific. It was like making decisions between the worst, and worse and worse than that. So if they're like, it was terrible. The whole thing. Like I'm still traumatized talking about it.
So one of the other problems that started happening in schools was a systematic racism in within the school system, and it, psychologically the kids were not uh, reacting correctly to the diversity that we have always lived with in Canada. What do you think has to be done at schools so that, and I know that in that you
Yeah.
really like to enforce that in your curriculum when you teach.
Oh yes. I mean, listen, we're always bringing in diversity, inclusion. Um, it's so important. But, not only from a provincial level, I mean, you're talking about curriculum rewrites, and you're talking about, you know, uh, how do you want to say, these sorts of more sort of high level things. But on the ground, and this is where perhaps it comes to the work of a school board, perhaps more than just a government, because they can do advisories and they can do training and so on, that the Ontario College of Teachers has to make something that every teacher would do, right? But then that kind of training, but then it would come to the school board to do that actual professional development around acknowledging your own biases. What biases do we bring to the table? Because we all bring a bias, of some capacity or another, because we're human, right? We're part of the picture, so we can't always see the whole picture. That's how it is. So we're subjective. So we have to recognize that and be able to move past it. And so there has to be a lot of training and development and so on about that. So you have your curriculum piece that needs to change. You have your potentially like certification things and what needs to happen for people to be certified and remain and maintain their certifications. Again, writ large at the provincial level, and then at the local levels in the school boards, uh, you have to have real sound professional development along the way, maybe some mentoring around that and partnerships, because maybe my students, they don't look like me, you know and maybe that very few people in the building actually look like them. Maybe we have to bring in partners from elsewhere, um, to help with things like that. So there's lots of ways we can do it, but it has to happen at the policy level, it has to happen at the local level, it has to happen at the training level, and so on. And then we have to have some way of figuring out whether it's actually working. And what metric are we going to use to figure that out? EQAO by itself, do people read and write? Is that going to teach us about what kind of citizen they're going to be and whether they're going to understand the diversity and respect it? No. So we have to start to build in some other creative measures of how we're actually helping not only to teach skills, because I believe our education system is not just about teaching skills, it's an important part of it, but I believe it's about actually helping to raise healthy, productive, um, democratic citizens. So if I get there, God willing, with the support of voters in York South Weston, that's the kind of leadership that I want to bring to the conversation, to the table on all, and starting with what I don't know. No, you have to know what you don't know before you can actually bring the right people to the conversation, right?
So one of the, and we know that when we talk about diversity and
Yeah.
the workforce in the particularly the province of Ontario, we talk about one of the main problems: affordability of housing, and uh, how difficult it is to find affordable housing for the young people that are living their homes, their parents' homes, when they finish university, or when they get into an early stage with, and they partner up with somebody. So how how is that subject in York Southwestern, and how do you plan to tackle that? Because there is a lot of issues there.
Well, so it's a great question. And honestly, it, not only at the doors do I hear this, but I was teaching grade 10 civics classes, and I was ending one semester at the end of what I want to say, what was it? The end of February, and I was starting a new one. And so I had about 90 students leaving and 90 students coming. And you do the math, 180 students. And what's your big issue? What are your main issues in this order? Inflation and cost of living, housing, climate change, mental health, across the board. When teenagers, and I teach in an all boys school, when 15-year-old teenage boys are thinking about housing as their main issue, that is something that tells me something. It tells me these people are concerned about a future. They're concerned about a future and whether they have a place in that future, And I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that they do. Like I said, it's our business. So the beautiful serendipitous reality that we have in York South Weston is this: we have a federal government that has appointed the first ever Minister of Housing, Diversity, and Inclusion. His name is Minister Ahmed Hussein, and he happens to be the Member of Parliament in York South Weston. So I know I have it on good authority that we are in good hands here, because the budget that just came out federally a couple weeks ago is mainly a housing budget. It is about literally building housing and creating access to housing. Now, what can the federal government do? For all your listeners that aren't as nerdy as I do, and I am, and know what every level of government does, federally, they can provide some money to go towards certain things: rapid housing, you know, tax-free savings accounts, or rent, or RSPs that your child can then use when they buy their first home, things like this. Getting rid of the blind bidding, meaning person A, B, C all are bidding on a house. Nobody knows what each other's bidding, and so everyone's bid goes higher and higher until it's no longer attainable, as well as tax on speculation and so on. That's great. That's federal. The municipalities, right? And we have Francis Nunziata, and of course a good friend of mine, Deputy Mayor Anna Bailao, who's Toronto's main advocate on affordable housing. They're doing everything they can do at the municipal level to make sure we're going to get inclusionary zoning and so on and so forth, and that building can happen that includes affordable options. But we need to have a provincial partner in the middle of that. We need to have that provincial partner that's going to work with the cities to actually implement what the federal dollars, for the first time ever, are allowing us to do. And I know that Ontario Liberals are going to do it because we already were doing it under the last government. We had the Fair Housing Act, and we were literally working on inclusionary zoning, supportive housing, all of these things that we are now hearing about more and more and more and more. We already had that there, and this report got rid of it. So he's now bringing in a report to talk about affordable housing, not affordable housing, excuse me. He's got a report to talk about housing recommendations. And not once in that report, Eduardo, can you believe it? Not once does the word affordable housing come up. So it's going to fall to us again. And so you're going to hear more about the Ontario Liberal housing policies that have not been released yet. But you can bet that based on that history of the Fair Housing Act and the partnerships that already exist, we're going to be in a great moment if Ontario Liberals can get elected to be able to make that a reality. And by the way, not just for young people, Eduardo, my own father, who's worked a lifetime, 73 years old, honest as the day is long, hardworking, who taught me how to be a hard worker, had to sell his house a few years ago, and he's renting now as he's retired. That's how he's funding his retirement. So it's not just young people, it's seniors, it's people in the middle, it's people at every age not knowing how they're going to make it and whether they'll even have a home. So this is huge. Thank you for the question.
So, si tuvieras que darle un mensaje a la gente de la comunidad hispana,
Sí,
a los votantes de tu distrito, ¿qué
sí.
mensaje les darías?
Necesitamos un gobierno que quiere investir en nosotros. Ese gobierno es un gobierno liberal, porque siempre ha investido en nosotros. En el futuro hace lo mismo. Yo soy una guerrera, quiero ser la nuestra guerrera aquí en York Southwestern, para luchar para las cosas que necesitamos, en educación, en educación pública, sistema de sanidad pública, for our seniors, for our small businesses, for our future. So, muchas gracias para invitarme y para las preguntas. Y yeah, I hope I will meet you, que nos encontramos en sus casas, y que podemos hablar juntos. de lo que piensen.
Muchas gracias, Nadia Guerrera. Muchas gracias a nuestra audiencia por haber estado con nosotros en este día. Les traeremos más noticias, más gente que son la gente de influencia en nuestras comunidades. Y hasta el siguiente show. Les recordamos que sigan atentos a Spanglish World Network, al H.E.R Network, para las noticias que son la realidad de nuestras comunidades. Until then, I hope that you will continue to view this show across the single TV's channels 249 and 250. We are here every Wednesday at 7 p.m. And until then, until the next show, please remain at home, please remain safe. And June 2nd, it's your day to decide on what the future of this province comes along. Do it with knowledge and with strength. Until then, thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Guerrera, for being on the show, and we'll see you.